The poverty of General Santos City, Philippines, wasn't just a condition, but a daily battle that young Manny faced with a warrior's determination. Dusty streets and weathered wooden houses formed the backdrop where he grew up, sharing a small space with his 6 siblings, while the aroma of fried fish and the constant sound of motorcycles filled the hot, humid tropical air. From an early age, Manny learned that survival meant work, and by 8 years old he was already selling loose cigarettes and bread on busy street corners, watching men gather at dusk to watch boxing matches on small televisions. His eyes shone with fascination as he studied each movement, each punch, secretly imitating them when he returned home, using empty rice sacks as improvised punching bags. It was during this difficult period that Tito Dario, an experienced trainer already in his 50s, with scars from past battles in the ring, noticed the skinny boy who frequently stopped in front of his small boxing gym located behind a fish market. With compassion in his eyes, Tito Dario invited Manny inside, offering him not only free training but also daily meals, a gesture that for a hungry boy was worth more than any wealth. Under Tito Dario's patient tutelage, Manny discovered more than boxing techniques. He found discipline, respect, and purpose. The trainer's calloused hands adjusted his posture, corrected his punches, and most importantly, offered support in moments of doubt, when the weight of poverty seemed too heavy for a 12-year-old boy to carry alongside his hopes. The following years were filled with immeasurable sacrifices, with Manny waking before dawn to run through the still dark streets, training until his muscles screamed with exhaustion, and often sleeping in the gym itself when torrential rains made returning home impossible. Tito Dario became more than a trainer. He transformed into the moral compass and the father figure Manny never truly had present, believing in the boy's potential even when nobody else would bet that a street kid could become anything more than a fisherman or manual laborer. When Manny turned 16, he was already a promising talent in the Philippine amateur boxing circuit, accumulating impressive victories that began to draw attention beyond the borders of General Santos. Tito Dario's small gym, once nearly empty, now attracted dozens of hopeful young men, all wanting to train alongside the Filipino Hurricane, as Manny was beginning to be known in local fighting circles. On a particularly hot afternoon, after an especially intense sparring session, Tito Dario called Manny for a private conversation at the back of the gym. With teary eyes, the old trainer explained that he had been contacted by a manager from Manila who saw international potential in the young fighter, an opportunity that could never be wasted, even if it meant leaving behind everything familiar, including his mentor. The farewell was as painful as a punch to the stomach, with promises of occasional letters and phone calls, rare luxuries at that time, and the assurance that one day, when Manny became champion, he would return to find his first trainer. Tito Dario just smiled, handing him a pair of gloves worn by time but loaded with meaning, symbolizing not just technique, but heart and honor inside and outside the ring. The first months in Manila were a whirlwind of emotions and adaptations, with Manny fighting professionally in small arenas, sending most of his modest earnings to his family, and saving a small amount to one day repay Tito Dario. The letters he sent to the gym often returned without response, and the rare phone calls to the gym's number were answered by unfamiliar voices, informing him that Tito had moved without leaving any contact information. As his career took off, with international fights and titles beginning to accumulate, the absence of news about his first mentor became a silent wound that Manny carried alongside his battle scars. Even amidst the growing fame and the spotlights that now followed him, there was always a moment of reflection before each fight, when he touched Tito Dario's old gloves, now kept as a precious relic, a reminder of his origins and the values that shaped him as a man, even before becoming a champion. Years passed like rounds in an intense fight, and Manny rose meteorically in the international boxing scene. Almost 3 decades had passed since his departure from General Santos, transforming the promising youth into a living legend of the sport. His name echoed in grand arenas from Las Vegas to Macau, as he collected belts from different weight categories, a feat never before achieved in the history of the sport. His unique technique, combining impressive speed with devastating power, transformed him into a global phenomenon, transcending the boundaries of boxing. In the Philippines, Manny wasn't just an athlete, but a national symbol of hope and overcoming adversity. His fights paralyzed the entire country, with criminals suspending activities, politicians postponing debates, and entire families gathering in public squares to watch his performances. Children of all ages imitated his movements, dreaming of following in his footsteps, while adults found in his story the inspiration to persevere through difficult times. With fame came responsibilities and temptations. Luxurious mansions, imported cars and extravagant parties became part of the champion's daily life, now surrounded by an entourage of advisors, security, and new friends who seemed to multiply with each victory. Newspapers reported not only his achievements in the ring, but also his investments in companies, his entry into national politics, and his philanthropic projects in underprivileged communities. Despite the whirlwind of commitments and the constant pressure of the spotlight, Manny maintained a disciplined training routine, preserving the tireless work ethic that Tito Dario had instilled in him. On the rare occasions when he visited General Santos, he always made a silent stop in front of the place where the old gym used to be, now transformed into an electronics store, feeling the weight of memories and the absence of news about his first mentor. One night, after successfully defending his 8th world title, while giving interviews surrounded by cameras and microphones, a reporter asked about his early inspirations. With a heavy heart and a choked voice, Manny spoke publicly about Tito Dario for the first time in years, describing him as the man who saw potential, where others saw only a hungry street boy, and announcing that he had hired private investigators to locate his former trainer, promising that he wouldn't rest until he found him and repaid everything he had received in his times of greatest need. The investigations to locate Tito Dario proved surprisingly complex, even with the considerable resources Manny now had at his disposal. Records in General Santos were scarce. Many had been lost during floods or simply never existed in the fragile bureaucracy of small Philippine cities. Former gym members were interviewed, neighbors questioned, and even advertisements were published in local newspapers, all leading to contradictory clues or dead ends. While preparing for yet another title defense, Manny received weekly reports from the investigators, each bringing fragments of Tito Dario's journey after the gym closed. Apparently, financial problems had forced the former trainer to sell the space, followed by a series of temporary jobs that took him from island to island throughout the Philippine archipelago, always one step ahead of the investigators, as if deliberately avoiding being found or leaving any official trace of his existence. The most recent news, dated 3 years ago, indicated that Tito Dario had suffered health problems after years of hard work in a fish processing factory in Cebu. Hospital records showed treatment for hypertension and heart complications, but after discharge, his trail disappeared again in the labyrinth of villages and communities scattered across the more than 7,000 islands that make up the Philippines. Investigators confirmed that he frequently used different names, avoided official documents, and lived in remote areas without access to modern technology, making his location virtually impossible through conventional means. The frustration of not being able to locate the person who had shaped his first steps in boxing began to affect Manny emotionally. In training, his concentration wavered. In interviews, he became visibly emotional when the subject came up, and on rare nights off, he rummaged through old photographs yellowed by time, looking for details that might provide some clue about his mentor's whereabouts. It was during a charity visit to a children's hospital in Manila that an unexpected encounter rekindled hope. An elderly nurse, recognizing the famous boxer, approached timidly after the official event and mentioned that her brother had briefly worked with a man named Dario Fuentebella at a small drinking water distribution company in Quezon City. The physical description matched, as did the detailed knowledge about boxing that the man frequently demonstrated during work breaks, telling stories about a talented young man he had trained in the past. The suffocating heat of Manila punished the busy streets of Quiapo's commercial district, where street vendors competed for space and the attention of hurried passers-by. Manny, disguised with dark sunglasses and a simple cap, walked slowly among the colorful market stalls, following the precise directions provided by investigators who had finally located a concrete lead on Tito Dario. According to recent information, a man matching his former trainer's description worked selling water bottles to drivers stuck in the capital's endless traffic jams. The simplicity of that occupation painfully contrasted with the importance Tito Dario had had in shaping the now multi-millionaire world champion, making Manny feel a mixture of anxiety and guilt as he approached the indicated intersection. From a distance, he spotted an aged figure carrying a worn cooler, moving with difficulty between cars stopped at the traffic light. Even after almost 3 decades, Manny immediately recognized the characteristic posture, the way of walking slightly, tilted to the left, the result of an old ring injury that Tito always mentioned as a reminder from an opponent who taught me humility. Time had completely whitened his hair and deepened the wrinkles on his sun-bronzed face, but his eyes maintained the same perceptive sparkle that used to identify technical flaws in young fighters. Emotion overcame Manny as he observed his mentor from a distance, watching how he offered cold water bottles to drivers, occasionally receiving a few coins, often just negative gestures. His simple and worn clothes, the already tired walk of someone carrying not only the weight of the cooler, but decades of personal struggles, formed an image that squeezed the champion's heart like no punch ever could. Manny began to approach, but the traffic light turned green and the cars moved forward, taking Tito Dario to the next intersection. Following him discreetly, Manny observed how his former trainer interacted with people, the same gentleness, the same respect he showed in the old gym, regardless of how rudely he was treated in return. This silent dignity amid adversity was precisely what Tito had taught beyond boxing techniques, a lesson Manny carried with him in every interview, every public appearance, every interaction with fans and critics. Gathering all his courage, Manny finally approached Tito Dario during a break, when the elderly vendor was resting in the shade of a solitary tree in the avenue's median strip. Removing his dark glasses, he pronounced the name he had called so many times during the exhausting training sessions of his youth. The reaction was immediate, a recognition that transcended words, eyes that widened in surprise followed by a smile that illuminated the face worn by time and hardships. The embrace that followed carried the weight of years of separation, of unshared achievements, of difficulties faced alone. Tito Dario, now 75 years old, initially embarrassed by his current condition, tried to explain that he had always followed his former pupil's meteoric rise from a distance, feeling silent pride with each title won, but deliberately avoiding contact, so as not to appear to be seeking benefit from someone else's success, even though he had contributed to the foundations of that extraordinary career. Through restrained tears, Manny discovered that his mentor had faced a series of misfortunes after closing the gym: health problems, failed investments, and even a natural disaster that destroyed his modest home in a distant province. Now, without formal retirement or close family, he was left with only the dignity of daily work selling water to survive, silently carrying memories of better times. His situation was one of true vulnerability, living in a rented cubicle in a tenement without running water, often having to choose between necessary medications or a complete meal. The conversation that followed, sitting in a small local restaurant, where Manny insisted on paying for a complete meal for his former trainer, revealed that Tito Dario had never lost his passion for boxing. In his rented room, damp and cramped, he kept newspaper clippings about Manny's fights, watched broadcasts on store televisions when he couldn't afford to enter establishments that showed the events, and occasionally still guided neighborhood boys who showed interest in the sport, charging nothing but dedication and respect. Deeply touched by the humility and silent loyalty of his first trainer, Manny shared that for years he had tried to find him, that he had never forgotten the fundamental lessons received in the small gym in General Santos, and that he considered this reunion an opportunity to give back not just materially, but by demonstrating that the values transmitted had remained intact, even amid the fame and fortune that life had subsequently provided him. In the days following, The reunion, Manny personally dedicated himself to transforming Tito Dario's reality without fanfare or publicity. First, he ensured complete medical care, discovering that his mentor suffered from treatable conditions that had been neglected for years due to lack of resources. Specialists were consulted, appropriate medications prescribed, and a recovery plan established to restore his quality of life as much as possible. A comfortable house was acquired in a quiet Manila neighborhood, furnished with attention to details that would make Tito Dario truly feel at home. It wasn't an ostentatious mansion, but a dignified space that respected the simplicity that had always characterized the former trainer, including a small yard where he could grow the Philippine medicinal herbs he had always appreciated, and space to receive young people interested in learning boxing. At first, Tito Dario was reluctant to accept such generosity, arguing that he had done nothing more than fulfill his role as a trainer so many years ago. Manny, however, was emphatic in explaining that it wasn't just about material repayment, but about honoring a connection that transcended boxing. It was about publicly recognizing the importance of someone who believed in his potential when even he couldn't see it clearly. On a particularly significant afternoon, Manny presented Tito Dario with documents establishing a lifetime pension that would guarantee his financial security for the rest of his life. More importantly, he invited him to join his technical team as a special consultant, not out of charity, but out of genuine recognition of his unique wisdom and experience in the sport. The proposal was structured respecting the physical limitations of the elderly trainer, while valuing his intellectual contributions and his ability to analyze opponents and strategies. This invitation wasn't just an honorary position. It represented the complete restoration of Tito's professional dignity, returning him to a place of respect in the boxing world that he had lost decades ago due to circumstances beyond his control. The most emotional moment came when Manny organized a small private ceremony, gathering only truly close people, to present Tito Dario with an exact replica of each belt he had won throughout his career, along with a handwritten letter detailing how each title carried in its essence the fundamental lessons learned in that small gym in General Santos. On the back of each replica, a simple but profound inscription: "Without strong roots, no tree reaches the sky." A phrase that Tito himself used to repeat to young fighters when emphasizing the importance of boxing fundamentals. Months after the reunion, the transformation in both their lives was evident. Tito Dario, with restored health and renewed purpose, had become a respected presence in Manny's training camps. His accumulated experience perfectly complemented the technical approach of younger trainers, creating a synergy that further enhanced the already impressive arsenal of the champion. During preparations for what would be announced as Manny's final professional fight, a special decision was made. Tito Dario would be in the corner as head trainer, closing a cycle that had begun decades ago. The news reverberated intensely in the Philippine media, with journalists retrieving the story of the great champion's first mentor, transforming him into a national symbol of silent perseverance. Together, they initiated a discreet program to identify and support dedicated trainers in underprivileged communities throughout the Philippine archipelago, recognizing those who, like Tito Dario had done, dedicated their lives to guiding young people without charging anything in return. It wasn't a grandiose foundation with a pompous name, but a practical support network that provided basic equipment, training opportunities, and small stipends that allowed these mentors to continue their essential work without having to abandon it due to financial needs. On the historic night of the final fight, with the lights of the MGM Grand Garden Arena illuminating the ring while millions watched around the world, the image of Tito Dario whispering final advice to Manny before the fight bell became instantly iconic. These weren't just technical strategies being shared, but the culmination of an extraordinary journey of two men who, starting from the most adverse circumstances, never allowed difficulties to determine their values or limit their ability to positively impact each other's lives. The victory that night, achieved with the characteristic determination that always defined Manny's fighting style, was dedicated not just to his country or his family, but specifically to his first trainer. In the emotional speech after the fight, The champion made a point of emphasizing that his greatest legacy wasn't the titles or accumulated wealth, but the genuine relationships built along the way and the ability to recognize that no one achieves true success alone. With Tito Dario by his side in the center of the ring, Manny demonstrated to the world that true greatness isn't just about reaching the top, but never forgetting the hands that helped in the climb, especially those that extended support when there were no guarantees of return or recognition. If you like this story, leave a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories.